A weirdly common problem in Final Fantasy XIV, possibly especially because of the age of the game combined with the amount of changes the game has got over the years, is that some players will claim that something is true without ever checking if it actually is. Either because they assumed it is the way they think, or because it was like that at some point. Welcome to Final Fantasy XIV Mythbusters, where I and my friends highlight the odd claims and misconceptions players make, and test them to see whether they are true or not, while also explaining how you can test it yourself so you can learn how to science stuff in Final Fantasy XIV. Number 1. The first boss in Dusk Vigil's stunlock can be blocked by standing with the person getting stunned. False. The way this boss works is that it can use Rock of Ages, a ranged stun, Woolly Inspiration, a cone sock that also stuns, Tuskbot, which is an AoE stun, and finally Rout, which is actually a line stack AoE. The claim suggests that if you simply stand with the person getting stun-locked, you can protect them from the chain stun. But in reality, the only thing that can be helped with by standing with the victim is the Rout, which is a weirdly visualized stack marker and does not stun, even if you take it alone. Supposedly, an A rank with a similar mechanic has this regular line telegraph replaced with an indicator that clearly marks that it is a stack marker. With that said, do not stack with your friends for the other mechanics. You will just get everyone stunned instead of just one person. I imagine this rumor came about because one mechanic is meant to be dealt with by stacking, but the mechanic in question is actually the most irrelevant mechanic of them all. Rout will not kill you if you take it alone, unless, perhaps, the person getting stun-locked was the healer. In that case, maybe they are so low that it could kill them. But the real danger, all the other mechanics, are, for some reason, just unstoppable. You are, for some reason, meant to be stunned for 20 seconds. That is so funny though. Number 2. Use healing bonuses like Krasis and then apply Kardia. It will snapshot all the buffs and heal more until you reapply Kardia. False. Hypothetically, it may be possible that Cardion, the buff that Kardia applies to your target, genuinely snapshots the other buffs on the target. However, Cardion actually doesn't heal at all. Cardion is more like a planted flag indicating where the heals from Kardia goes. And each time Kardia activates healing through Cardion, they check the state of the target and thus then snapshot whatever state the target is in. And if they still have a healing bonus at that point, that would work. But if it has run out, the fact Cardion is affected by a 20% healing bonus due to snapshotting does nothing, because Cardion does not actually do any healing. To take another similar example to this, Ninja's Bunshin technically applies a buff to yourself, which causes your next 5 regular GCDs to do an extra attack. You could say that Bunshin tapes an additional attack with its own potency onto your other attacks, similar to how Kardia and Cardion tapes on a healing potency effect to your spell attacks. In the same way, Bunshin snapshots your situation on each attack, not when you initially apply the buff. Furthermore, as we have demonstrated previously in this series, debuffs that increase your damage done applied on enemies would require such an effect as Bunshin to snapshot on each individual hit anyway, even if it snapshotted your buffs. It does not. To return to the Sage thing, you probably wouldn't want Kardia to snapshot buffs anyway, because this interaction would go both ways. If Kardia snapshots your state when placed, it also means it does not observe any further changes to your target or yourself, meaning using an ability like Krasis and not reapplying Kardia would then do nothing for Kardia. Number 3. Is Kardia spell healing or not? Let's start with what this question even means. We've spoken about the key difference between different healing boosting buffs in a previous episode of this series. If a buff says increases HP recovery via healing actions by X, then it means mostly anything goes. If the buff instead says increases healing magic potency by X, then it will only work on spells. Now, there are not many buffs that boost healing magic potency. In fact, the list is so vast that I can keep, well, all of the tooltips on screen like this. It is genuinely just Temperance, Neutral Sect and Fey Illumination. Oh, and Dissipation of course. Adding to this, 3 of these 4 effects only boost the user's healing magic potency, making them non-shareable. This means, as far as Kardia is concerned, only Fey Illumination matters, and is also the only way to test this question. Knowing that Kardia straight up does not snapshot buffs, for this test, simply have a Sage with Kardia up on themselves spam doses on a striking dummy. Have a Scholar on hand to use Fey Illumination, and keep spamming doses. If you really don't believe me when I said Kardia does not snapshot, you can even reapply Kardia to yourself if you so desire. It won't change anything. This tells us that Kardia's healing is not spell healing. On the one hand, this makes perfect sense because Kardia is an ability. On the other hand, the healing is activated by a spell, although I suppose maybe the argument is that that spell is not healing magic because it is also an attack. However, whatever the reason may be, at the very least, Kardia appears to not qualify as healing magic. This means Kardia would be boosted by something that boosts all healing done, but not something like Fey Illumination that is more specific. Number 4. If you have multiple bards playing different songs at the same time, what actually happens? If 2 bards are using different songs, you might expect to benefit from both of them since they're different buffs. But it turns out, perhaps for quality of life reasons, that bard songs don't stack like that. What actually happens is that you will swap between benefiting from each song momentarily every few seconds. Given all the other tests in this series, we can pretty much safely assume that we would only benefit from both buffs if they would show simultaneously. The fact that they alternate means that the effects themselves also alternate. We can deduce this because multiple dancers partnering the same person will grant them multiple Esprit buffs, because each individual dancer can benefit from that, but only one standard finish damage buff, because that one does not stack. Combine this with the fact that Dragoon's Dragon Sight stacks, at least for now. Maybe it is gone in Dawn Trail, but by that we know that if we see multiple buffs, they probably stack. With that out of the way, what determines when the buffs flip? We did multiple tests here, and in most of our tests it turns out that I would use a song about 1 second after Angel, where Angel would use theirs about 2 seconds after me. It turned out that my songs consistently were active for about 2 seconds and Angel's for 1 second. From my viewpoint, it seems my song activates about a second before each repertoire timing, and if this is how it works, then it means that each bard pulses their song effect every 3 seconds or so. And if you want to maximize the uptime of one particular song, you would need to make sure the song that pulses second does so as quickly as possible after the first. This could lead to getting more uptime of the quote-unquote better song, but this is completely irrelevant because the potential raid-wide DPS gain of having slightly more uptime on the Wanderer's Minuet buff outside of burst windows is certainly less than the damage the bards might lose from actually trying to make that happen. There's also a possibility the interaction is something completely different and we interpreted it wrong. Regardless, the important part really is that these songs alternate, right? Number 5. Haste, not to be confused with skill and spell speed, reduces the GCD and cast times, yes, but how does Haste interact with other things speed stats normally work on? The particular things up for debate are: 1. Does Haste increase auto-attack damage? If not, then 2. Does it maybe reduce your swing timer? 3. Does Haste increase dot damage? And 4. How about hot healing? Let's take it one at a time. For all tests, I recommend, for example, going to Bozja, bringing an augmented set with haste on it, and also the earring. For me, I have a combined 8 haste for my caster sets, which hopefully will be enough to tell if there is a difference. Of course, this reduces my GCD by just about 8% as expected. Now then, first, check how much damage our auto attacks do normally without haste. I will use Summoner for this. 20 swings in just about 60 seconds and a bit, as expected. Average damage of just about around 124. Next, we equip the haste gear and try again. This time, we actually fit 21 swings inside the 60 seconds. Almost 22. This is exactly what we would expect to happen if haste reduced our swing timer by 8%. So from this, we can conclude that haste does reduce our swing timer, quite handy for Paladin's Oath Gauge generation. Take note that speed stats normally just increase auto attack damage and do not reduce the swing timer, or delay as it is called on weapons. The swing damage we observed here is about the same as normal though, so haste does not seem to increase auto attack damage. This would mean that haste is functionally similar to Monk's Greased Lightning, which reduces GCDs and auto attack delay specifically, and nothing else. If haste also does not increase the damage of dots or hots, then haste is functionally identical to Greased Lightning. For the dot test, I will first see how much damage Thunder 3 does over its duration as a black mage, and then test again with haste equipped. The initial Thunder seems to fluctuate between 534 and 579 damage per tick for its regular ticks, ignoring crit and direct hit ticks. Next, we try again with haste gear equipped. The average damage swings slightly differently, but does approximately the same minimums and maximums, with too little of a difference that 8% would have impacted it. As such, it appears haste does not affect dots, and from there, I think it is unnecessary to also check hots. We can conclude that haste works identically to Greased Lightning. I hope some of you that like to hang out in Bozja, Zadnor, Delubrum Reginae, or any sections of Eureka find this little test interesting. Bonus fun fact. While you do get a notification that your gear is synced to some specific item level when you enter these zones, they actually completely normalize your gear while in these adventuring forays, just like they do in deep dungeons. And if you so desire, you can test this yourself by switching your armor out for level 1 glamour pieces and notice that your HP is unchanged. Number 6. Blue Mage's Diamondback is somehow active while Byakko grabs you, but stops working exactly when the State of Shock slam jumps to damage calculations. Claim suggested by fellow creator Zane Lionheart. True, by the way. Byakko Extreme has this mechanic where he casts State of Shock, which stuns you. Then he grabs you and slams you into a stack marker. It also gives you a physical vulnerability debuff that makes the follow-up slam that comes immediately after do 10 times more damage, so you don't want to participate in both markers. But if you're alone, Byakko will insist that you do. Now, I can inform you that the slam itself does about 18,500 damage with no defensives with my current setup. So, I tested this twice. First, I used Diamondback for the initial grab, and you can see here that Diamondback continues through the stun, but for some reason disappears exactly when the slam lands. Ding! 18,500 damage. He then grabs again, and this time I take 185,000 damage. 10 times more. For the second attempt, I instead used Dragon Force for 40% damage reduction, which indeed reduces the damage by about 40%. And then immediately put up Diamondback for the follow-up slam, and still take 185,000 damage. I initially thought the reason for this interaction was that he applied a stun to you when he slammed you, but not when he grabbed you, which of course doesn't make much sense. But instead, he actually removes the stun when he slams down, and for some reason, this also removes Diamondback. I have no idea what causes this interaction to be like this, but I could imagine this would make Byakko Extreme very, very difficult to solo for blue mages, if not outright impossible. I believe you can avoid receiving the physical vulnerability debuff if you take 0 damage from the slam by using barriers and defensives. but I don't think Blue Mage can produce big enough barriers for that with Gobskin. With that said, have you seen or heard about some absolutely ridiculous myths in Final Fantasy XIV that you would like to have explained or demonstrated? I would love to hear about them in the comments. I would also like to thank Kitsu, Angel, and Catdamon for helping with some of these tests in the video. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Ko-Fi, link in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, if bard songs stacked, then hypothetically, 2 bards intentionally having 2 different songs going at all times could be worth around an additional 0.75% to 1.2% more DPS on top of the single song we'd normally expect, across the entire raid for the entire fight if done right. It would, however, also mean at least one of the bards would be unable to use Wanderer's Minuet during raid buffs. I wonder if that would be a bigger damage loss overall though.